this is something that I wanted to ask you. Did you see the quote from the Dem aide who was like, sports are just too right-wing now, and that's why we didn't win? And it's like, no, there are a lot of reasons why you didn't win, but also there are lefties who are sports fans. Like, yeah, we see Palantir when J.D. Vance and Elon Musk and Donald Trump are at the Army-Navy football game. We see the Lockheed Martin sponsors, and it disgusts us. Like, we know about this stuff. So that was long-winded. Yeah. Did you see the quote?
I didn't, but it's a dumb quote. Sports are more progressive than they ever have been. And in fact, sports lead progress in this country. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier 17 years before the Civil Rights Act.
Amen. People
like Billie Jean King and Althea Gibson were incredibly important when it came to women's rights. And so I think that is an ignorant quote. That is a quote not understanding any of the context of it. And it's a quote not understanding now, because it used to be like, okay, I did a podcast for a bit called Major League Podcast, where I would interview former Major League Baseball players. And so typically these were guys who played in like the 70s, 80s.
Love it.
And I had to unfriend a lot of them on Facebook because I couldn't deal with their bullshit. I was just like, oh my God, their viewpoints are so backwards. And I've gotten to know a bunch of the guys playing now, and they're not like that. Yeah, you got some Nick Bosas, absolutely.
For sure.
But the majority, I think it's the majority now, of people playing professional sports have some progressive in them, if not a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the owners are wealthy billionaires and thus are going to be that type of person.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone can go to a game. Like, Trump at a game doesn't make a difference. Like, that doesn't mean the sport is right wing. It just means he bought 3 tickets.
Or was given.
Or was given 3 tickets.
Can I read you the quote real quick? Because I pulled it up, and I'd love to put this in context. So this is Harris campaign manager Rob Flaherty, and Awful Announcing posted this quote. It's from Semaphore, so let's give them credit. Sports and culture have sort of merged together, and as sports and culture became more publicly and sort of natively associated with this Trump conservative set of values, it got more complicated for athletes to come out in favor of us. It got more complicated for sports personalities to take us on their shows because they didn't want to, quote, do politics, he went on. That's not to say that it was the campaign person went on.
Yeah.
That's not to say Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and LeBron James and all of them coming out wasn't impactful or important. It was more impactful because it had gotten so much harder. But certainly the culture that has been associated with heavy sports watching has become associated with right-wing culture in a way that makes it harder for us to reach people, close quote.
Oh my God, shut up. Like, that is so ignorant and so tone deaf and so out of touch. Also, it ignores the fact that, like, NASCAR is starting to have pride events. And
true.
Like, and I mean, listen to any interview with Greg Popovich. Like, there is such a shift in sports toward the left. And yes, are there these gravy swilling idiots that also exist there? Absolutely. But that is a space that has shown progress before. Sports are such a huge part of accepting people of different races, different genders, and while they are still, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's been tremendous success, and that quote was one of the most sour grapes pieces of garbage I've heard in a long time, and that is a shame because there are a lot of reasons why Harris lost, and I don't think a single one of them has to do with sports.
I agree, but I also think this is just playing the blame game. No one wants to really be like, you know what? There's a reason why we lost. Instead, it's no. We didn't lose. The problem is they couldn't be reached. We did everything right. That's what I'm hearing from this.
The main reason the Harris campaign lost is because they didn't hammer home that Trump's messaging was false. The idea that Trump won because of the economy Yes, whatever party is in power during a bad economy has a disadvantage. But this is a perceived bad economy. This is an individualized bad economy. This is actually a good economy.
Right.
And if the Harris campaign leaned on the idea of how bad things were under Trump, why is he going to make things better? Why do you believe he's going to make things better? Hammered home his business failings, hammered home that the fact that he's a good businessman is a freaking myth, that he's a con man, and like stick to that messaging, that would have been impactful. And I think that would have done it. But, you know, they didn't. Instead, I guess it's Nick Bosa's fault.
Right. It's Brock Bowers' fault for doing the touchdown dance. Yeah, of course. I know that there's a saying in comedy about like punching up. And Carlin even talked about it in that famous clip with Larry King. Do you find it to be rather easy to make fun of someone like a Ted Cruz or a Matt Gaetz because they are millionaires sitting in Congress as policymakers, or because they are just deeply unlikable for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, I find it easy to make fun of Matt Gaetz because he's a pedophile. But I do think that, you know, punching up is important. The victim in life should never be the victim in your joke. The one thing that annoys me is, like I posted a joke about Matt Gaetz the other day, and someone commented and they're like, "Oh, the jokes write themselves," and I was like, "No, they don't. The premises might,
right?
But like, we're still working here, you know. Like, this is still, if they write themselves, why didn't you come up with that?" I do think they make it easier for someone who's in tune with it and someone who, you know, writes for a living. But you still have to, in order for a joke to be good, you have to say something other people aren't saying. One of the reasons, to go back to it, one of the reasons the Tony Hinchcliffe MSG performance was so appalling is because, I mean, those were schoolyard jokes. Like, that wasn't a clever way to say any of the things that he was saying. It was just mean.
Right.
It was, you know, there's a, I'm so annoyed that I do not remember who said this because I quote it all the time. I think it was Ryan Niemiller said that a joke has to be more than 50% funny. So if a joke about race is 70% funny and 30% about race, it's a funny joke. If a joke about race is 30% funny and 70% about race, it's just a racist observation. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, I think a lot of the humor that's out there is generic, and that's okay because I can't fix my car, my mechanic can.
Right.
You know, professionals can do things that non-professionals can't. And that's fine. But I do think that they're such cartoonish supervillains that they do provide a lot of ammo.
Mm-hmm. I've seen, on the same plane, I've seen a performance from Hinchcliffe. I've seen a performance from Jim Brewer when he's going on those tours with like Michael Flynn. Just really, really odd. The Greg Gutfeld show is supposed to be a comedy show on Fox News. It's deeply unfunny and just mean. Can right-wing comedians be funny?
Yeah. Mark Klein is an example of one who, you know, he is a conservative, but his material is not about being mean to people who are already marginalized. You know, it goes back to kind of what I said before about, for the most part, conservative is a philosophy about governing and economics. It's not social at all. And, you know, it's turned into something more now, which is unfortunate. But in order to be funny, you need a deep understanding of the human condition. And in order to have a deep understanding of the human condition, you typically recognize who's marginalized and who's not. Now, you can have the skills to be funny and then also be a narcissist or a sociopath or, all these other terms that I'm not qualified to diagnose. And then you think you're the one who's been marginalized. You think you're the downtrodden, etc. I think stand-up should be compassionate. And one of the things I really liked about what Jeselnik said and just his views in general is that the playing field shifts the same way that, like, in 1980, you didn't have to know how to hit a 105-mile-an-hour fastball. Now you do.
Right.
If you were looking at today's game, today's game of baseball with the knowledge that people had in 1980 about weight training, about diet, about sabermetrics, about all this other stuff, you wouldn't be as good. And so when the world changes, when your sport changes, whatever that sport may be, you need to be able to adjust to the change. Mm-hmm. And an observation that was valid 20 years ago isn't typically going to be valid now. And so the idea of, like, oh, we can't say anything anymore. It's like, no, you can say lots of stuff. You just can't say something stupid and wrong.
Right. And that's how I feel about what, Hinchcliffe has kind of said afterwards in the aftermath of his performance at MSG. And then also, the obvious elephant in the room here in this context is Chappelle, because he went after a marginalized group. Is there a way to, because I know, watching Hassan Piker's streams and seeing the reaction that a lot of people have to Chappelle, because he has a lot of trans fans, is I can't watch his stuff anymore. Is there a way to, like...
Oh, sorry, my wife just got home.
It's okay. My wife just left, so I was figuring my dog was going to do that at some point and how I was going to play it. But yeah, is there a way to, like, still appreciate the comedy even though they have certain viewpoints that are, like, detrimental to an entire community?
Well, I've never been able to separate the art from the artist. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, but Roman Polanski made brilliant films. I don't care. He's a monster.
Mm-hmm. But have you heard the Ignition remix, Steve?
The people who, anyone still listening to R. Kelly's music, like, just, no, don't. Rough. But with comedy, it's even more difficult because so much of who a comedian is reflected on stage. And for instance, with Louis C.K., some of my favorite bits of his were his incredible observations about women. And, he has that great bit about how a woman's natural predator is a man. Mm-hmm. And it's such a wonderful observation. But then I go, oh, but it's dishonest. And it came from a place of dishonesty, which makes it difficult for me to appreciate, even though what he said was still valid. With Chappelle, I did a bit about that on my last special, about how when it started, like, about our culpability in losing Chappelle. Because when it started, he made a couple of really poor choices in some material. And instead of looking at his body of work and who he is as a person and going, he's one of the most important progressive voices of our time, the internet wanted to kill him. Mm-hmm. No one has ever changed their mind from 1 million people yelling at them, ever. In fact, there have been tons of psychological studies that they will dig their heels in. I understand. I don't think it's the responsibility of someone who's been told that their existence is invalid to then be kind to the person who said so. What is difficult is the people who that wasn't about, who got offended on behalf of other people in a way that they weren't offended as much as they were trying to make themselves feel good about who they were, and pushed him further and further to the right. And it's at this point now he's so far over on that we've lost him. I think we do need to take some responsibility in how we react to things. I can't stand that the left is a circular firing squad. But that said, it's very hard for me to listen to him anymore. Because it's hard for me to go, oh, these wonderful views come from the same mind that has these horrible views. And so much of appreciating comedy is an involuntary, laughter is involuntary. And so when in your head you're going, I don't like this guy, nothing they say is going to make you laugh again.